people depending on which city they happened to live in, and make sure that everyone had a basic level standard of services everywhere in Minnesota, because that was what we valued as a state. And frankly, that's not been the system anymore. We're dealing with the ongoing collapse of a system that used to be. A lot of what we've done as a city over the last decade has been dealing with us being excised from that system, first by losing all of the local government aid, and now by losing the market value homestead credit. The silver lining, if you will, is that while things look awful at the state and there doesn't seem to be any appetite for returning fairness and justice to the statewide tax system, we in Maplewood have pretty much been cut already to the bone by what the state can do to us. They can't get blood from a turnip. And so while people in neighboring cities, I was talking to a council member from North St. Paul recently, and he said, you know, half of our budget comes from intergovernmental money still. Half of the budget of North St. Paul comes from state, local government aid, or from fiscal disparities, which is a redistribution of money from suburbs like Maplewood that have more commercial tax base than some of our neighbors. And so that's part of our tax levy too. We don't actually get the money. It goes to support other nearby suburbs. Those cities are going to be facing some really tough decisions the next couple of years, because I'm going to bet to you all that the state legislature is not going to be looking at revenue increases. They're going to be looking at cutting the budget, and they're going to go after those pots of money that are currently going to those cities. And those people are going to be jacking their taxes up 50% or more, or they're going to be laying off cops and firefighters and closing down programs and not plowing their streets, because there's no other way for the numbers to work. And so we're at the bad end of a long process that used to make Minnesota a very proud place where you could trust that you would get a very basic, good level of service in any community, whether you were traveling on the road or over the holidays or wherever you lived. And that it has become less the case, and it's going to become less the case in the future. So we're trying to deal with it on Maplewood's level, and I think we're doing a fairly good job considering. But we've already gone through a lot of the pain that is only beginning for some of our neighboring cities.
Thank you. Okay, so
You can add a little history to that, if you like.
go ahead.
What John was referring to was called the Minnesota Miracle. When Wendy Anderson was governor in 1971, they raised state income taxes and alcohol taxes to drive the cost of property taxes down, because it's the most regressive way to raise money, because it has nothing to do with your ability to pay. State income taxes is based on your ability to pay. But unfortunately, in the last 10 years, the state decided, in order to balance the budget, to cut all those aids. While the good news, what John mentioned, is that we no longer get any aid from the state. But other cities like North St. Paul, who are so heavily dependent, are going to be really hurt. But back then, in 1971, he made the front page of Time magazine as a Minnesota Miracle. And now look how things have changed in the last 10 years. Thank you.
All right, so the council is at the point where we need to be moving forward on any discussion we want to have having to do with resolution certifying our taxes for 2011 and also adopting a budget. As has been mentioned a couple of times during the course of this meeting, the staff has been working along with the council for the last 6 to 8 months trying to develop a budget and determine the levy that we will need for 2011. I have to thank Mr. Antonin and his staff for some of the tremendous work that they have done. Sometimes it's difficult to see everything that happens in the process, but a couple of highlights that I think that you should have some awareness of is that we hear comments from people that say, you know, Social Security got no increase, or, you know, I haven't gotten a raise at work, and so city should live within its means. It's important to note that we are going to, a little later in the meeting, approve the contracts for essentially every employee in the city, and it is a 0% increase. And so we're doing just what is happening out there in the neighborhoods. The city's employees are getting no increase. We've reduced the cost of our health insurance, mostly through the willingness of our employees to take on a high deductible type of insurance. And so you've seen in the papers on a regular basis how health insurance is skyrocketing. Well, we have made a big difference here in Maplewood. We're operating with just one less person. That's not a lot, but we're operating with less people than we were. And another thing that was talked about here earlier, but I think needs emphasizing, is that with the way that we have handled the finances of the city, that if it were not for the lack of state funds, which now we get nothing, but 4 years ago we did get money from the state, if it was not for us losing that, over the last 4 years, our increase was $54,000. $54,000 on about a $40 million budget. And so the things that we are doing here in Maplewood are well thought out and are working well. Mr. All mentioned that our tax rating, what's the right word? Our bond rating was improved, meaning we can borrow money for less. And there have been comments made about the fact that this council, or at least parts of this council, I for sure, and Ms. Juniman, because we've been here for a while, we definitely have run up a larger debt in the city because of the fact that even in this terrible economy, we can get our streets rebuilt for a lot less money because the bids are a lot better. And so we said, we know it's a bad time, but we can save so much money that it's worth it. We're saving so much money on those street repairs that the cost far offsets the amount that we have to pay to get the loans. And so it's a smart financial decision. And so we have done a lot of good things here in the city of Maplewood, and I'm sorry that there are some people whose taxes are going up. I mentioned earlier my taxes are going up on the city portion of my tax bill, and I don't like that any better than anyone else. And just, I guess, a case in point that in 2009, my household income was only 1/4 of what it was in 2008. We did a little bit better last year, but you know, I'm in construction. There is no work in construction. My wife lost her job. And so I am not operating from some position where I'm way above and aloof from what's going on out there in the real world. And so when I saw my taxes went up like $90, I didn't like that. And I don't intend, I don't know what the council is going to do, but I don't intend on stopping just yet. Maybe in about 10 more minutes, we could make a couple more cuts and make it so we can reduce a little bit further and do the best job that we can possibly do. But my position is, and I think the council would agree, that we have made some great choices in the last couple of years for the city, in that we are doing everything that we can to make sure we provide the services that you want, but do it in a fashion that keeps our costs down as low as possible. So, there's my speech. That being said, there are some things that I think that I would like the council to consider, and I don't think that, for the most part, they would be too burdensome on the city. I personally delivered paperwork which we saw in a recent FYI, I believe, that Nest had finished its run. And so we get back from Nest about $40,600 in that general area. And we also saw that there is the revolving loan program which we had for years, which as far as I know not a single person ever used, for $45,000. And so those are the first two things that I would like the council to consider, that we take that amount of money and remove it from the budget and or from the levy, because this is money in both cases that I never saw in any budget documents, and so I think that in cases where we get money in that's kind of like found money, that the best use of it is to give it back or not take it from the citizens. I further would like the council to consider the possibility of reducing the contingency. I don't want to eliminate it. The absolute maximum that I would consider taking is $80,000, which is half of it, I think. But that is up for debate on the council. And the final thing is having to do with the taste of Maplewood. And somebody brought it up, I can't remember who. But I believe that we should do something different with the taste, and we can have a little bit more discussion about that. But I believe that we have really about $35,000 in next year's budget for it, and I'm thinking that we should reduce it somewhere in the neighborhood of by about $15,000. So those are the items that I would like to have a discussion on, along with anything else that the council would like to discuss. Kathy?
Well, first of all, on the 2011 expenditure request list that Mr. All presented, I hope people are aware of, under the Public Works worker, reminding people that it's a shared position, and a number of years ago we shifted park maintenance to Public Works. So it's more than just a shared position. It's like, if we don't have people in these positions, if we think we've gotten complaints before about things like, when's the next time you're going to mow that park? We haven't seen anything. So we have to have people to do the work. And this is parks maintenance. It's not Public Works, which sometimes gets a bad rap. I'm not sure why, except certain people like to make that rap, I guess. I would point out that when Mr. All made his presentation, he talked about the housing replacement program and the commercial property redevelopment and the tokens of $10,000 each that are actually in the budget. But it's a mindset, and as one of the people who said I'm not leaving here without something in that one fund, we can't wait forever to do those things. So I appreciate the fact that even in tough times, we have to let people know where our priorities are going, and in an aging community, they better go there, or we won't have to worry about taxes because we won't have a community. I will arm wrestle with Mr. Rosbach on the contingency fund based on what my other colleagues have to say. I don't want to reduce it at all. I might be talked into reducing it to $100,000, but that makes me nervous. And that isn't, if you look at what we might need it for, it's not a wish list, contrary to a certain warped individual's interpretation. It's things that could happen that might need to be done, that if, in this point in time, if we take it out and all of a sudden we need something, you're talking about cutting something that's going on right now. Once we flip the calendar at January 1, 2011, you're talking about totally changing or cutting an operation that's already moving forward. So I'm not real big on cutting the contingency, so we'll have to debate that, I guess. As for the whole argument or false impression or whatever about state money, apparently Mr. Zick thinks he's smarter than everyone. Oh, there's a shock. Including all the people who structured this over the years. And I'm going to say to him and anyone else who thinks like him, what I've said to some of my colleagues in the past up here: you inherit whatever there is when you come here. And so even a system that may appear broken to some people in the populace is what we're working with. And I think it's sort of amusing that the community that you live in gets all that free money because you're so big at flapping your yap about it. And so sometime when they have to cut a cop and you croak because you didn't get a response, hallelujah. Anyway, it's those kind of disparities over the years that we've had to fight. It isn't about all the free money we got, it's about all the things we paid into that other people have been cashing in on.